My biggest area where I would like to see the cycling community do more is in terms of conservation.
Maybe conservation looks like we sit in those municipal meetings with city planners and talk about land use plans together, because I guarantee you we agree on what that should look like.
Sounds like we're building about 3 miles of trail every single week.
It's something to that effect.
If
I wouldn't
not
doubt
more,
that.
and that's like averaging over the last 10 years.
I look at what's happening in County and I feel like this is not the way it's supposed to be.
People are coming here every year and having some kind of impact on the land and using it in some way.
I would tell you that conservation, from my perspective.
Welcome back to the Ozark podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Veet, joined as always by co-host of the show and my good buddy, Kyle Plunkett.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Doing great. I'm anxious for this conversation in a good way. I feel like I've been waiting on it. There's anticipation built around it because we got into a topic that we didn't expect the feedback in a lot of ways that we got, and expected some of the feedback that we got, and I'm ready to like continue the conversation.
Yes.
So I'm excited. All that to say, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I'm super excited, and I'm super excited because we have someone who I heard from earlier this spring. Our listeners who've been listening may have heard me reference the Ozark Studies Association, and this was kind of my first exposure to hearing you talk. And what I remember the room, and you've got like all these generational Ozarkers and historians and people approaching it maybe from a similar vein of how I think about the Ozarks. And it was like this panel of what's going on with biking in the Ozarks, and it was like letter after letter after paper of people from UC Berkeley writing about the region, people from University of Virginia writing about the region. They were all saying like, what is going on here? This doesn't feel right. And then they put you last. And I was like, oh man, this guy has got the guts to come in here and talk to these people. And you did such a good job.
Thank you.
Just weaving the tension and understanding the complexity and even asking some hard questions. I remember asking you a question there, and I thought you answered it, and you were honest, and you were saying, yeah, we don't maybe do a great job at that, but we can, and there is a path forward. And I was just really, really impressed. So
thank you
for this conversation, being that we've approached and stepped into a world that is really not our world. The biking community is not what we do, but it is growing within our area. And I think there's a lot of really good things that the biking community does. And then there's things that I think, any new group to an area has room for improvement. And not to say that they're the only ones. Hunting and fishing community has a lot of room for improvement too.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all coming at it from the same place, and I think we all hopefully have the same goal of what is best for our area, for the outdoors, for our natural resources. And so without further ado, we have here with us Mike Rusch.
No, thank you, Kyle. Kyle, thank you very much for having me here. I feel like I get to walk into a nice, calm conversation, so I'm excited about that. I appreciate you guys teeing that up so smoothly in many ways. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for having this conversation too. I think it's really important to have a place to have these conversations, because I think without them, we're going to continue, maybe if there is dysfunction, we're going to continue that. And so, I'm excited about this conversation as well too. And I just appreciate you guys leading out and putting yourself out there to step into a place that maybe you didn't fully understand. And
we definitely didn't. I think that would be an understatement. I've learned so much. We've had a lot of people, first-time listeners, commenting, reaching out and saying, hey, I agree with some of what you said. I strongly disagree with some of what you said. We've had some different, even leaders within the biking community reach out and saying like, I would love to come on the podcast and tell you why you're dead wrong. and that's great. And honestly, I think it's easy to see all of the comments and negative feedback. We also had a lot of people say, wow, that was one of y'all's best episodes yet. So to me, it showed the tension is real. And whether you want to address it or not, it exists. And there are people who, for whatever reason, and everyone's got a different perspective, they don't like what's going on with the explosion of the biking community, whether that be road biking, gravel, and mountain biking, which I've learned are all different communities in themselves. And even some of them don't really get along with some things. Or whether you're, on the outside, you're a non-cyclist or a cyclist, there's tension. And so, but what I was encouraged by, honestly, was the fact that so many people reached out and said something, even if it was, negative or directed towards us or our guest, Dr. Phillips, it showed me that they cared enough to be like, what you're saying about the biking community, that it's consumptive or we've got some attitude or whatever. It shows me that we actually have that in common, that like we're going to agree that is not good and that's not how we want to be portrayed. We want to be seen as protectors of our area. So I think that was a lot of kind of the takeaway from the last episode. But I guess if this is the first episode that you're listening or watching, go back. This is kind of a part 3, really, of a conversation that we started a couple weeks ago with Dr. Jared Phillips. He's a history professor at the University of Arkansas. He's a farmer in the area, and did not hold back on his opinions on biking in the area. And so that would be where I would start. And then this is picking up with Mike. We're going to be talking about kind of from the other side of, you talk a lot about biking and the community, and you advocate for the good in the community. And I think that's all super important stuff, and I'm excited to get into it. Plunkett, what was your takeaway from our last episode, or last couple episodes?
I was thankful for the people who reached out and would mention all the positive aspects of biking, specifically the community stuff, the health benefits, the connection to land, even the ways that they themselves or even, their crew would specifically steward different trails or different resources or different whatever to help just show, man, like we're as much as part of this natural world as you are as outdoorsmen, as hunters, as fishers, and we're trying to do our part. And so to have a caricature of this thing that we don't fit into is not fair. And I actually, seeing that viewpoint helped me understand, like, if I get put into the caricature of the beer drinking redneck who drives around and shoots deer in the dark, I'm going to be unhappy.
Yeah, I don't like that
that's
either.
Not at all what we're going for here. Trying to actually do this in a sustainable, ethical, helpful way when it comes to a resource. And so that even helped me kind of bridge a gap, I guess. And that's what we're hoping this conversation ends up being, is some bridge building, some gap mending.
Absolutely.
Even though we know there's a lot under that still needs to be talked about and sorted out, but
Bring it.
that was good. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to figure it out today, but we are going to jump over to Mike and start diving into it. Mike, I know, I think you got a chance to listen to our last couple of episodes. Before we jump in and talk about your personal connection to biking, what were your kind of thoughts from what you saw and, what you felt like we said or Jared said that you were like, yep, we should talk more about that today, or I don't know, I disagree with that, or I don't know, just kind of what was your overall takeaway from the last two?
Yeah, number one, thanks for having me. I think it's great to sit down and have this conversation. I think the question in many ways is, number one, there's a broader cycling community that is more diverse than probably was talked about. So we should understand that, because I think it's helpful in a way that it's not an us versus them. I really do feel like there's a lot of common ground that we can actually work together on a lot of things, because I think at the end of the day, whether you want to call them the systems or the power that's working in our space is probably affecting us both, even though we don't see it. And so it could be real easy to sit back and look at a difference between what outdoor recreation looks like, between cycling or hunting or fishing, whatever that look like. I think sometimes if we're not careful, that can be a distraction. And so I think it'd be good to understand what are the commonalities, what's the root cause of all of that. And I think at the same time, I would also voice that I think some of the concerns that have been raised are really valid. And there are things that we need to talk about and understand and move towards. No one's perfect. No one's figured this out. I think we are united by a deep, deep love of the Ozarks. And while that may look different, while we may move in these spaces different, that if we can step back and kind of frame it in that space, then I think we're going to have a beautiful Ozarks for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get lost in the distraction of it, although I do understand the need to dig into it and to understand maybe the nuances of it that could be really helpful. I think in many ways, I think it's easy sometimes to be frustrated with people. We don't know each other because we don't know each other's stories. And I think it's these kinds of conversations that allow us to peel that back and to learn everybody else's story in a way that's going to give us, hopefully a bit of empathy to say, you know what, the next time this happens or that happens, I'm going to keep that in mind. And so, I think this is a great start to a conversation.
Yeah, cool. Well, take me into your background and your journey into the biking universe and how that became something that you cared so deeply about, and how you got kind of weaved into the community, and just why do you do so much to advocate for the biking space? Like, just walk me through that of how you got into it all.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I'm getting too old to run, so that's probably been the movement of a bunch of old guys getting
A little bit
into
easier
cycling.
on the knees.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier on
great.
the pride too, and the ego maybe a little bit. But yeah, I think during so I grew up in Northwest Arkansas before cycling and trails was really kind of the focus that it is today. So I remember those days, and it wasn't something that I grew up with or understood. But it was really around COVID when. Really, cycling was kind of one of the. I live in downtown Bentonville, so let that say what we can talk about that too if you want. But like, it was kind of one of the only things that we could do that we felt like was reasonably safe, was to go out and ride together, and it really allowed a lot of neighbors from our community who lived in these areas to come together in a way that we wouldn't otherwise from a social standpoint. And so, not only being outside and that exercise, but it allowed us to maybe allowed us in many ways to step back from kind of what was happening in the world. And so that was a good thing. And I think through that process, it's, and you guys know this too, if you're floating down a river, if you're in a deer stand together, like it's hard to spend that much time with someone and not actually get to know them pretty well. And so when you were out spending hours and hours or days together or weeks, you get to know who people are in a different way. And so it helped us maybe understand each other in a way that maybe we couldn't in another way. Through those rides, we got to, I would say, not explore, but we got to see parts of our county and our state that we would have never otherwise seen. I've lived here for almost 40 years, and I'm seeing my place in a brand new way that I'd never seen before. And I think that's when I stepped back, and I fell in love with the Ozarks all over again in a different way, in a way that was connected to the land, that was connected to community, was connected to people. And that bike has, and I'm biased, of course, but it has this maybe magical property of being able to just slow us down. We're not distracted. We don't have phones in our hands. We get to see the people that we're with, and we get to see the communities. If we're really honest about what we're doing as we ride through communities, if we're respectful, if we want to learn from that posture, then we're going to be able to step into a place and see it hopefully for what it is. And in enough time in those spaces, it allows us to kind of peel back our biases in many ways too. So, I think that was the time when it grew in community and it grew in activity, and it really became, in many ways, our friends and family network that we still enjoy, and it's been an incredible thing to be able to be a part of. I'm humbled to be a part of the group that I am today that we ride together with. So
yeah, that's awesome. I kind of said earlier, you've got different communities. You've got road cycling, you've got gravel biking, and then you've got mountain biking. We had, I think, generically just been saying mountain biking for everything or cycling for some of the stuff.
I think, with Dr. Phillips, it was just cycling.
Yeah.
And he took it road primarily because of the farming practice and how it could butt up against road bikers.
Yeah.
So,
but each one of those operate within a different space and different places in a different way, and they connect with the land in different ways, I think, too. So I guess, where do you fall within that? And then maybe just for someone who doesn't understand or know, like what's the difference between the three communities, just so we can kind of set the framework for going into all this.
Yeah, that's a great question. This could take our whole time if you want. Yeah, I mean, think of it like, I don't know if you want to think about it in the way you may with, if you're out with archery, or you're out with a rifle, or how the different types of ways that you can go and express hunting or fishing or fly fishing, if you're bow hunting or with a gun, that's kind of the difference within that cycling community, right? So while you may be out there kind of doing some of the same things, where you can go, how you travel, the equipment that you use is all going to be pretty different, but which leads to a different experience. So, yeah, you've got mountain biking, which obviously has probably been the most visible thing in Northwest Arkansas for the past, 10 years or so with the trail building. But then I say this, you get so many people coming in to do mountain biking, but most of the locals, while they still mountain bike, they do something called gravel riding, which is really taking bikes with big tires that are meant to go over a lot of gravel and are out on those county roads. So a lot of the people that you guys were talking about in the last episode are probably those gravel cyclists who are out on gravel roads enjoying out in farm, rural areas. And then you've got road bike, which is probably not as big of a deal here. And those would be people that are really constrained to the roads. And you guys know the traffic here is ridiculous. And so that's not as a big of a part of the cycling community. So you really have kind of people that are moving between those two that do both. Most of our cycling that we do today is mostly in the gravel cycling space.
Okay, gotcha. And so those are going through rural roads. They're going out just to get literally on any dirt road or gravel somewhere that's kind of outside of town. safe and just exploring different areas that people maybe haven't seen or just want to be a little bit outside of the city. It's kind of how that works.
Yeah, I mean, those bikes are meant to go on any kind of terrain. So, and they're meant to go for long distances. They're not meant to be super fast. They're meant to really be kind of a touring bike that you can go out and spend all day on them if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so within the space, and when we look at Northwest Arkansas and then the broader Ozarks in general, we're obviously, we live here in Northwest Arkansas, so we end up seeing that a lot more. I think, Bentonville kind of serving as a hub, we see that a lot more. But we have people who listen up in Missouri and over in North Arkansas, even in little parts of Oklahoma, Northeast Oklahoma. And so I know that a lot of different communities are investing in building new trails and trying to kind of, capitalize on this push, this movement. But it is happening in a lot of different places. What specifically do you see expanding the most? Or like when we talk about the cycling boom, where do we see that effort really being pushed? Is it to get more gravel, more dirt roads, or is it to get more mountain biking trails and, building out onto public land and investing in places like that?
Yeah, from my perspective as one who participates in those, I think it's a pretty big investment and initiative in all of those things at the same time, frankly. Okay. You've got mountain biking trails that continue to be built and to be maintained and to be improved. I don't see that slowing down any time. And you see many times the people that come to Northwest Arkansas that as a destination for tourism, that's going to be the thing that probably draws them here first and foremost. Yet at the same time, you've got gravel cycling, and literally you have some of the biggest cycling races in the country that come here to finish up and do their championship end of year rides, where like the U.S. champions are, anointed by how they do in the series of gravel cycling. And so like that is exploding as well too. And that's not unique just to the Ozarks. I think this is something that's been going on in other places out west in Colorado. We see that it's been happening in Oklahoma. It's happening around us. And I think probably within the past, 5 to 10 years is when it's really started to kind of grow here in Northwest Arkansas. Why? Well, we love the Ozarks. It's a beautiful place. It's still relatively small and uncongested. And so there's still a lot of places where you can go, a lot of undeveloped land that you can go and build mountain bike trails, and still a lot of gravel roads that are going to stay gravel roads that people can go enjoy. So, but I see it like it's like a blitz on all fronts, it feels like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And is that blitz coming from companies, enthusiasts, it's city planners? Like it's just kind of the whole is looking at it going, this is a good thing, and what we're going towards?
I think that's a good question. There's no doubt. The vast majority of that investment has come from Walton Family Foundation, which has been used to encourage cities and municipalities and the state to invest in those kinds of things as well too. Tourism, as we all know, is a huge industry in Arkansas, and we know that Arkansas as a state has economically been challenged. And so these are things that are not just happening in Northwest Arkansas, but they're happening in the Delta as well too. The Delta is looking at models from Northwest Arkansas to say, hey, if there can be an economic benefit from this, then can we participate in that as well too? And so I think you see the Walton Family Foundation really being the driver of that early on, but they have, I think, worked very hard to probably bring a lot of other entities into that. And so now you've got county judges across the state who are working within their counties to adopt, gravel cycling types of destinations and to map those things out, because they see that those cyclists coming into those communities, are hopefully going to spend money from a recreation perspective.
Yeah.
So, which I think in a lot of counties, we've met a lot of those counties that are incredibly happy. That really is kind of one of their biggest hopes, is that can be used to bring more people into those communities. Yes, to provide an economic advantage, but to learn their stories and learn the beauty of the people that are there.
Yeah, that makes sense. With knowing that the kind of the original vision and a lot of the backing behind the biking boom has come from the Walton family being interested in it and investing in that way. We kind of talked and we broached the subject with Dr. Phillips as there seems to be this underlying tension between cyclists and non-cyclists, and that's going to include a variety of different reasons for why people feel that. But I'm just curious, on the cycling side, do you feel the same tension? And if so, where do you think some of that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, 100% the tension's there. And I think in some ways it's pretty predictable. And I hate that on one hand because I don't think it needs to be that way in any way, shape, or form. I also think, and Dr. Phillips said this too, it's what the bike represents. And I think it's easy to look at the bike or the people out there and make some really big assumptions about who those people are, where they're from, what they do, what they believe. And it's just not helpful, right? Because it's not true. That it wouldn't be fair for a cyclist to walk into into deer camp somewhere and assume that everybody's the same, right? Or everybody who goes duck hunting does X, Y, or Z. It's just not the reality of it. I think what it reveals, though, that I think is a worthy conversation is probably based on the fear we have of what it looks like for rural gentrification, for urban gentrification, as we see this place grow at a pace that, frankly, none of us can keep up with. We're scrambling to understand what's going to stay the same. What can I do that I did when I was a kid that I can do with my kids or with my families? How is this not all changing? We could go on a short ride out west of Bentonville and look at what's happening in Centerton, and you've got massive transformation of what used to be farms and dairy farms and all of that turning into single family homes just as fast as they can build them. And as one who's lived here for a long time, I'm like, whoa, time out. Like, what's happening here? That's not a cycling issue. We see it in a cycling space. It takes cycling out farther because now you've got people living out there. But what you see happening, I think, in many ways, is really a symptom of our urban planning and how we think about county growth and people coming in for economic opportunity. And the reality is that we live in a world with systems and institutions that do a couple things really well. They displace people and they extract resources, and it doesn't really spare anyone. And I think what we're seeing in Northwest Arkansas in many ways is not a new story. I think it's the same story. The form may look different, but the fear is of displacement. I know living where I live, I hope I can live there for as long as I can. I hope my kids have the opportunity to live there. The reality is that every day and every year, and as the economy grows here and the jobs change, it just becomes harder and harder and harder. And I think, if we take the stereotype of maybe what you guys talked about in the first episode or the second episode, it can be easy to play into that. And I think it's a distraction, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
That's my fear.
That's fair.
I think it's a distraction from the bigger thing that we should be working together, not as cyclists or hunters or fishers, but we should be working together as community members to have a vision for this place, to be active in our civil municipalities and our governments, to make a dream for what we feel like this should be. And that just doesn't happen. I mean, I've been involved, in housing conversations with the city of Bentonville, and, it takes 15 people to probably influence a council to go one way or the other when you've got 65,000 people that live there. And so I think we, as people who love this place and love the Ozarks and want to, hope that it persists for generations and generations to come, we have to understand that that's what's happening. We also have to have the understanding that that's probably what we did when we came here too, as white settlers from,
Right.
like I was with the Quapaw Nation last month in Oklahoma, and guess what? They're having conversations about, conversations about displacement, and the people that displaced them were people that look like you and I too, right? And so I think having that understanding of a long memory of understanding and seeing what's happening is going to be really important, because it's not about what you do and it's not about what I do from a recreation perspective. It's about how we think about this place together. And, the idea would be that, if you want to belong to this place and we're going to share this space and I want to belong to this space, then we better have a conversation about that, because your ability to belong and my ability to belong needs to work together. And the moment that it starts creating a situation where you don't feel like you belong or I don't feel like I belong, we need to call a time out and say, we got to come back to the table and have a bigger conversation about what we would hope for this place. And so that's my fear, is that I think sometimes as people or interests are looking to buy up land or to expand or to grow economic advantage, it can be, I would say they could look at us as, arguing about hunting and fishing and cycling, and they probably love that because that's a great distraction from maybe a bigger question that we need to be tackling together.
Yeah.
So that's my soapbox. I can go on forever.
I had not thought about it like that. That's helpful.
Yeah,
It helps me show that a lot of a lot of our feelings, even in that conversation, are a product of it's just a product of our place, and that there's so many pressures that are going to influence how we think, how we talk, what we value. That it's one, kind of unavoidable, but two, you can recognize that and go, but there's still got to be a common place to actually come to the table to have those conversations. If we're not willing to, then the pressures can do whatever pressures do, which is really dictate what you do, right? I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, and anytime you have, I think like the two things that the stuff that we talk about and that is important to us is public lands, shared resources. Just call it like Arkansas, the state, the land, that everything that we talk about on our podcast comes back to natural resources, whether it's public lands, public waters, places that we hunt and fish, wildlife, protecting those areas and protecting wild spaces.
Arkansas and Missouri.
In Missouri, yes. Sorry.
The Ozarks as a whole.
The Ozarks as a whole. But specifically, as we're talking about this, I think the other thing is community. We believe in community. You have to belong to a place, or I think it would be not. I just think living a life where you're not connected to any place or any person or any group of people, it just seems like a lonely thing. I don't think that's how we were created to be. And so belonging to a place, both physically and relationally, I think is super, super important. And so thinking about the mountain biking community, the cycling community, gravel, it does, seeing how much these, everyone all cares about getting outside. A lot of people are saying, why are you guys talking about this? Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to go out on my bike. I'm just trying to get some exercise. I'm trying to hang out with some of my friends. And I love that. I think those are all positive things. I am by no means anti that. I'm not anti-bike by any means. And so I have to think about, why do I attach cycling to like the growth in Northwest Arkansas? And like you're talking about, Centerton's changing and we're building neighborhoods in old farmlands and places that, you grew up here, we grew up here, like seeing places change at a pace that I can't comprehend. And I have to break those out. But I think why I combine them is because I see the people backing it and the people pushing it are also responsible or are encouraging the growth. And there's good and bad to that too. At the end of the day, we talked about this on one of our internal episodes. You have places like Northwest Arkansas that are growing and you're seeing an economic benefit. And then you have places that are outside in their smaller towns and they're dying. And the kids aren't staying there. They're not moving back to the farm. And those places are dying too. And that's a problem on the other end of things. And so it's like you can't just put your foot in the ground and say, we're not changing. We're never going to adapt to the new things. We're always going to do it this way, because I don't think that works either. And at the end of the day, culture is always going to change. Northwest Arkansas has always changed. Think about the communities coming in, Latin American communities coming in, Marshallese communities coming in. The places have changed and it will continue to do so. And it's just finding out what the community looks like. You just said it well there of, the moment that you start having groups of people feeling like they don't belong in their own communities, that's when you kind of have to call a timeout. And I feel like maybe that's what some people are feeling within, like, oh, that is totally not me. When I go up to Bentonville, if someone's living in Fayetteville and they go up to Bentonville, they're like, I don't even know where I fit in this place. And it's, I think maybe that's part of where some of that tension comes from too.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I feel that way too. As somebody in the cycling space, I would argue that I don't know that you're going to find a mountain biker or a gravel cyclist that wants more traffic, that wants more paved roads, that wants more sprawl. We don't want the removal of agricultural places or farmers, and at the same time, we live in a space where we have a story of some really big corporations who have done really well within what it looks like to economically prosper within capitalism, right?
And brought a lot of good. Right? And so I think that concern in the back of everyone's mind is a valid concern. I would also say that's a very small part of what's happening. And, we've talked about it in this way that, hey, outdoor recreation is one thing, but recreation from a framework perspective, our hope is it would move us towards a relationship back with communities, back with land. And that as we do that, we can move into a deeper understanding. You guys talked about a deeper understanding of membership and what that looks like to really be invested in a place, and then into belonging, which says now the way that I'm going to live my life is going to be orientated to save
or to work towards the betterment of where we're at. I think the fear is when outdoor recreation doesn't move towards a relationship, the chances of that being extractive, I'll use that word, become real. And it should be another place where we kind of call a timeout, for lack of better words, and say, hey, let's have a conversation about how do people within outdoor recreation, everybody that I've spoken to that's leading initiatives within outdoor recreation, I think their desire is to move towards broader relationships. And so we need to, I think, as people who love this place, how do we move and encourage people and maybe frankly expect people to say, yes, come here and recreate. But I want you to show us how you are moving us towards a deeper relationship with the land and with place. And that for me has always been kind of that litmus test to say, hey, is this what's happening? Is this going to be extractive? Is it going to be something that's going to remove? Or is it going to be something that's going to actually build a deeper connection back with my place? And I think that's where we've tried to spend all of our time, and where I've spent my time is trying to find those places and those people who are going to move us towards a relationship. Because when we do, man, some beautiful things can happen.
I have a quick follow-up to that. How do you have that conversation? Because podcasting is a conversation that we're airing between the three of us. But then for anybody listening, it's receiving a conversation and not, unless they're talking with us, actively engaging within a conversation, or talking with you, actively engaging within a conversation. So as you're talking about recreational leaders and communities as a whole, and people who are moving in to recreate, people who are coming just to spend some time and then going, other cultures and communities who are moving in, who are a valuable part of our community, like how would you propose that conversation happens, or how do you even set that table?
I think number one, how do we all get on the same framework? I'm not saying that framework is the best or the right one, but what is the framework that we can all work within so we all have the same expectation? How does hunting and fishing move us towards relationship? Maybe that's a little bit more clear to you because you grew up doing that. Maybe it's a little bit more clear to cycling, but the idea would be that we could move into those spaces of relationship. And so I think it's having a common framework and a common language that we can all use together. I think that's that would be a really helpful starting point from my perspective. I think the other thing too is that understanding that when we move through a space, however we do that our first job is to really try to understand what it looks like. From who is this place? Who are the people that live here? What are the stories? What are the histories? What roads am I traveling on? This is my question every time I ride around anywhere. What happened here? And I think that's been a guide that's allowed me to step back and to slow down and to not view it as this, maybe I'll use Instagram experience. I think I heard that somewhere before. But to use that as a guide that says, if I can understand what happened here, I'm going to understand the people. I'll probably understand the place better. My job is probably not to belong to that space. Unless I move there, I'm a part of that community. But I think it starts with a posture of wanting to learn. And unfortunately, most of the time when we're out doing what we all want to do, that's not where we start. And so I think it's a different posture that we can move into that. I think when we do that, the tone changes dramatically. Because then it becomes about how do I respect the people that are there, knowing that I'm moving into a place that I don't know, that I'm not familiar with, that I don't understand. And that could be, come from Bentonville to Fayetteville, frankly. I take a different posture. And so my posture becomes one of learning. And it helps me ask better questions. When I stop, when a farmer's coming down the road, I need to get out of the way. Because they're there working. They've got a livelihood they're trying to protect and to grow and to hold on to. And my space here can wait about 5 seconds for people to move forward. So that's a different posture than thinking I have the right to do whatever I want in the spaces that I go. And I get it. I see it too. There are, I get mad at cyclists as well too when I'm in my car. I want to be real clear. My wife and I have this conversation a lot. She goes, "Do you know what that cyclist did in front of me?" I'm like, "Oh, I would hate that too." But so I'm not immune from that either. But I think it's being intentional about the posture we have. And trying to be a student of what a community looks like.
You mentioned framework, and I know that and when we were talking before this episode, you had mentioned you have either heard someone talking about some kind of framework to kind of approach some of these conversations. That if you want to go there, I'd love to hear more about that. And then also, I'd love to hear more about I know you guys just came out with the film Ridge to River, an Arkansas Traverse. and really cool. I got a chance to watch it. It was part of Bentonville Film Festival, and it was another one of those things that I watched probably a month ago or so, and watched it and kind of took a step back and was like, okay, here's Mike. And these people, they're trying to relate and they're trying to connect, and they're not doing what I maybe thought they were, which was just riding by on their bikes as fast as they can without picking their eyes up and just trying to like get their PR, hit the fastest time, or cover the most miles. Yeah. And just, I don't know, hearing y'all talk about that, I thought it was a really interesting film. So 2 things, framework and then the film, if you want to talk about those.
Yeah. Well, the framework, I think, is that it's this idea of like our outdoor recreation is a legitimate thing, right? I don't want to delegitimize that. I want to validate that we do need outdoor recreation from a tourism industry to help economically what's happening in this state. I do think the obligation of moving it towards this idea of relationship, where I begin to care about that place and I begin to understand, is something that we have to do. Beyond that, when we move in this idea of membership, that's when like what I do becomes orientated about what's for the betterment of this place. Mm-hmm. And if I'm riding through the Delta, I think it's really important that I understand relationship, and over time, I'm going to move into a place of membership. And this is a term that I know we talk with Dr. Jared or Dr. Phillips as well too, around what that looks like, especially in an agrarian community type of space. But if we can do that and do that well, then we move into this place of belonging. And I would tell you that I think my maybe evolution over the past 5 years within cycling has come that full circle to where now I 100% feel like I belong to this space, and I want to invest my time into this space to make sure that it is preserved and that communities feel like they can belong. And so I think it's that encouragement to people within these industries to move through those spaces and just ask the next question. And I think that's sometimes what's missing from that. And so we could talk about that all day long.
Yeah,
I do think the film, The Ridge to River. So Alison De La Houssaye, who's a filmmaker, phenomenal filmmaker. Who heard we were taking a bike ride across the state of Arkansas from basically Bella Vista all the way down to the Louisiana border, down by the Mississippi River.
She said, epic.
Yeah, it was 472 miles. And she said, hey, I want to send a film crew. And I'm like, wow, that sounds like a really terrible story. And I think what she showed us in many ways was that framework process that really began to unfold, in that we started as this challenge, a bunch of guys on bikes trying to ride across the state. But as we did that and we rode through the Ozarks, and it was October, and watching the mist rise up into the upper, central portions of the Ozarks, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Just like, I don't want to ride anymore. I want to sit here and watch the beauty of what's happening down into the Arkansas River Valley, and understanding how the stories that happened there, onto the Trail of Tears. We went into Little Rock and we watched the economic conditions change dramatically on one side of the bridge versus the other, if you will, moving into the Delta, going to a Japanese internment camp, one of 2 that was in the state of Arkansas, and hearing the stories of what that looks like, going to a place like Arkansas City, which has, used to be one of the wealthiest places in the state, 100 years ago, and it's not anymore. And when we showed up, I mean, there was we were treated like kings and queens when we showed up in Arkansas City, where they had put the Arkansas Heritage Trail, which is this trail that the state's working on right now to go basically along the total eastern border of the state. But those communities are looking at cycling as a way to bring people to find the beauty that those communities still have, mm-hmm. to find the beauty that the people in there still have, but maybe it's been lost from our public memory. And so when we showed up, we had the mayor and the police chief and the game and fish and we had I thought we were in trouble, first of all. I was like, we didn't do anything wrong. But the mayor, but I think that film was such a beautiful representation of what it looks like to use the bike, to see our state and to fall in love with it, and to see the people in a way that we wouldn't otherwise see. And so it opened us up to those stories. And it wasn't just me. I mean, we were 9 other people. Some of those people had just moved here because they wanted to be a part of the cycling community. So they didn't know the story of Arkansas. And I've watched some of these people come through here and be, some of the greatest community members who are raising their hand anytime they can to embrace this place, to work towards its betterment. And they really have moved into these places of membership and belonging. And so I maybe I'm passionate about it because I see it happen. I've seen it happen. And my hope would be that if cycling can be that kind of tool where we can work together with all kinds of communities to move people towards belonging, then yeah, again, the Ozarks are a great place. They're going to continue to be a great place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man. One of the things you said about kind of making our lives to fit the places, it takes me. I love Wendell Berry, and I know Dr. Phillips referenced it. I don't know if
I've heard of him.
Okay.
Yeah,
he is awesome, and he's got a quote, and we've used this quote before in our Neosho series that we did last spring, but it's this piece. This is part of a broader poem about hope and having hope for people, communities, places. And within this, he has this quote that says, "Because we have not made our lives to fit our places, the forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope then to belong to your place by your own knowledge of what it is that no other place is, and by your caring for it as you care for no other place. This knowledge cannot be taken from you by power or by wealth. It will stop your ears to the powerful when they ask for your faith, and to the wealthy when they ask for your land and your work. Be still and listen to the voices that belong to the stream banks and the trees and the open fields." And I like that. To me, I see when I start to see things where it's like, man, if you move to a place and all you ever did was go to work, come home, sit in your house, watch TV, and just do that over and over and over, maybe get outside and play golf. I'm like, man, you could do that anywhere. You don't have to live here. Like, that exists in 99,000 other places, and there's nothing that lends itself to being like, I do things differently because I live in a place that is unique and is different. And just building our lives around the places that we inhabit, I think, is important. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I know that protecting and conserving what we have is important. At the end of the day, what we all have in common is the ground that's under our feet. We all live in the same places. We all live in the same neighborhoods. And even though we may do different things, we share those things, especially when it comes to public lands. And so I think for me, when I take a step back and I do try to separate like the boom of Northwest Arkansas and you know, Walmart and Tyson and how the communities are changing, when I really pare it back, I think what my biggest area where I would like to see the cycling community do more is in terms of conservation. And not that, I don't think that there's, I see within the community there is the appetite and the desire for that to happen. I truly think that because the emphasis has been on getting it up and going and building it out first, it has left some gaps where people like us are sitting here as like, what about the places that you are building trails and you're developing and you're fragmenting that habitat, or, you know, you're putting trails on public land that we all share, and when we go and hunt and we go and fish on it, we're putting money into it through licenses and tags. If it's on private land, we're building food plots and putting, you know, clearing timber, putting food on the ground because sunlight's hitting the ground now, and we're creating habitat and places for wildlife and kind of leaving wild places wild. And right now, there are no systems within the cycling community that I see as an outsider that is actually going back into conservation. People want to say, well, the money's going back into the economy and the community that way, and I think that's great, but at the end of the day, you have to carve out a piece and set aside some type of money to go back to the actual land. Otherwise, more times than not, it doesn't actually happen. It goes back into bank accounts, it goes into more development and more pushing out of the communities into wild places and things like that. And so that's kind of where I've settled within this. Is I'm not anti-biking. I think biking does a lot of great things, really, really strong in community, even more so than the hunting and fishing community, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. And I would love to see more ways where conservation is a focus, because you do have a lot of people who, even listeners of our show who've listened for a long time, are saying, hey, I think you guys got this wrong. I'm a mountain biker, and I also hunt and fish, and I use my bike to connect with the place and go hunt and fish, and it's the same thing for them. And I think that's kind of where I've settled. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. What's your take on how the cycling community is pouring back into the actual resources where trails are being developed? Hundreds of thousands of people are coming here every year and having some kind of impact on the land and using it in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you that conservation, from my perspective, maybe just as a good human, hopefully trying to be a good human, but also as a cyclist, that, yeah, it's super important. And I think it happens. It's probably not as formal as you may see in other forms of outdoor recreation, where there is money exchanged for a pass, and that money gets reinvested back into habitat management, if you will. However, I think we think about it. Number one is I would expect, this would be my expectations every time a cyclist goes out, that they leave no imprint and no trace on the land. There is no reason in the world that they should be disrupting, someone who's out there that's recreating, that is on a trail, that is on a gravel road. There's no reason to leave any trace or to disrupt anything, first of all. Second of all, I think as we get to move into those relationships with those communities, I think the question is learning those communities. And I think this is an area where we could be more intentional, which is, what do those communities need? Not what do I think they need, but what do those communities need, and how do we connect in a way that allows us to do that? And I don't think there's great mechanisms to do that. Yeah, it's going to take a lot more work for a cyclist to do that. That's not an excuse. I'm just saying that I think there are some initiatives within the state that could be probably intentional about adding some of those ways of giving back or cleaning up. I've seen it happen in Benton County, where cyclists will go out and they'll clean up all the trash on the roadways, if you will, for gravel roads. So I know that those things are happening. I think the question would be, who can we talk to really figure out a way to do this in a way that's helpful to the communities in the way that they see it needs to happen. I think there are other ways from a conservation perspective that they're engaged in. Yes, there's an economic money that comes into a community, could be. I think one of the things that I would love to see more communities do is to try to think, rather than having outside commercial interests like a bike shop from somewhere else come in and open up, like, how does a community be intentional about opening their own bike shop in their own community, where that's locally owned and locally managed, and those monies go into that community and stay into that community? I would argue that could that be as helpful as other conservation efforts? In addition to that, would be another way of thinking about that as well too. So I know other states have fees for bikes. Arkansas doesn't have a statute like that. I know Texas does. So there are things at the state level. I think we have to be careful sometimes with those things. Bicycles are used by people who don't have cars and maybe are economically disadvantaged. And so there can be an adverse, effect to those for people who are not using a bicycle for recreation, but more for just, this is how I get healthcare, this is how I get food, this is how I get services, this is how I go to work. Yeah. And so I think we need to think deeply about those. But I would acknowledge that it's an important part. And if we could find that language those actions between those communities, I think it could be a really beautiful thing. So I would be the first person to sign up to say, hey, if there's a way that we can think about that intentionally, then let's do it. I think the other part of that too is understanding the stories of these places. We live in Northwest Arkansas, which has this just incredibly layered history of indigenous presence and removal, and the Trail of Tears and the Civil War, and global economies and agriculture. And we've got all these layers that I think sometimes we forget about, that we don't understand the beauty of sometimes what it looks like to remember. And we remember, we get to see our communities in a different way, because it's going to ask us to think about what does it look like to repair those communities in a bigger, broader, systemic, hopefully more systemic way that works for the betterment of everybody in those communities. And so, not to discount the conservation piece, I think we 100% need to figure that out. I would say let's go farther than that. And what does it look like to work collaboratively at the direction of those communities to figure out what is it they need. If cycling can help, if bringing 10 cyclists into a community can help, great, let's figure that out, because I think the economic advantage to our state and those communities is something that people are trying to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah, we talk a lot, and you just gave me a word that's really helpful. We talk a lot about responsibility and regulation. And regulation, there's policy, there's government, there's all kind of stuff involved. It's a big conversation. There's also responsibility, and that can be a pretty big conversation based around where have we not been responsible, or where we dropped responsibility or not picked up responsibility, anything like that. But that middle, there's a third R word now, and I'm not saying this is the language. I'm saying it's just helpful in my thoughts in this conversation, is if you have responsibility and regulation, there's a piece that fits in the middle of those two, which is remembering.
Yeah.
And it's remembering the stories and the history and the past and all of that kind of stuff. And it's remembering on the regulatory side, what has worked, what hasn't, what might, where has even other places done it well, how are they doing it, how can we implement, what can we leave, all of that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know, I appreciated your thoughts on it may not be as formal, and we have some ways that people are picking up responsibility. Now, the regulation piece may not be there, but like we're moving to that even in kind of the world of trying to remember why these communities exist and what they do here and how we can fit within them and all that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think about remembering too, as we've done the podcast over the last 3.5 years, we've learned a lot about the history of the Ozarks, and even down to the landscape level of what did the Ozarks used to look like. If we go back to Native American times, we remember that through early journals of people, explorers coming here, it looked completely different than how it looked today. You drive through the Ozarks in the National Forest and you think, oh, it's always looked like this. It's always been a closed canopy timber forest, and
It was a savanna.
And it wasn't. It was a
Right.
savanna. And if you look back at historical burning regimes, it was the whole state would burn every 3 to 5 years, and that created an entirely different habitat and landscape where you had post oak savannas, and it was sprawling, and there was a stand of trees over here, grasses and forbs and flowers, and then it was a stand of trees over here. It wasn't what it looks like. And so when I think about remembering, I look back of like, if that was how naturally God created it in my mind, and you had the indigenous people, the Native Americans, living in relationship truly with the land, so much to the extent that it was a sustainable way of life, and they relied on it completely without leaving an impact or as little impact as possible, to where we even don't have a lot of their history because it's degraded away because it was all made of stone, bone, and animal material. I think about that, I'm like, obviously you can get into an idealist kind of mind frame of like, we can't all go back and do that, and I don't think we want to. But the remembering what it could be or what it used to look like, and maybe that was like a purest form, it's something that there's something in me that's like, can we restore places of the Ozarks to mimic a more natural form, to where it is truly the healthiest for the entire ecosystem. And you've got public land set aside where, what if we were clearing and burning and opening that back up and turning that back into savanna and restoring the quail population, restoring turkey numbers, deer, bear, songbirds, like all of it. I'm a deer hunter, right? But I'm not just thinking deer, like all of it. And I see the cycling community as such a huge asset to have. And I think, if we're all going to be using public land, like we should all have a vested interest and somehow all be channeling money back into this place to make it the best it can be, whatever that is. And I just think the example I think of is like, if the three of us all owned a cabin together and we were all excited, we just bought it, we're pumped about it. And, y'all were going there, and every time you'd go, you were, working on stuff, you were putting in a new fixture, you were expanding the patio, you were doing the gardening, you were putting in a new room, adding on to the house. And all I ever did was come in and just do maintenance. And it was like, I sweep up, I screw some things in when they're loose, I pick up the trash, I take it out. Like, there would be some level of tension between us. At some point you would be like, hey, he's not pulling it, he's using it maybe even more than me, and he's not putting as much back into it as we are. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily happening, but when I think about just the license, and like for us to even go hunt, we have to apply and put in a tag and stuff like that. I just wonder what those avenues might be for communities that do use public lands like cyclists to, turn around and actually try to make it the best that it can be directly, having more direct input other than just like, well, we're helping the economy and things like that. That's kind of where my head goes on that.
I think it's good. I think maybe the first principle, let's not screw it up in the first place, right? So like, and I look at what's happening in Western Benton County, and I feel like we're like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. And so could we work together? Maybe conservation looks like we sit in those municipal meetings with city planners and talk about land use plans to have an opinion together about what those things could look like. Because I guarantee you we agree on what that should look like.
Right.
And I think conservation can look differently, especially with people that are more, I would say maybe traditionally more of an urban type of lifestyle, that you're going to find a lot of overlap with let's build more density. Let's keep things where they are so that we can continue to go ride on these roads for as long as we can. I mean, I've watched road after road after road get paved over. It's not funny. We've made a joke out of it every time. Like, we come across a road that has now been paved over. We stop as a group. We have a moment of silence that, thank you for the service of this road. But like, it's tragic, right? You know, I mean, I'm sure if someone went by us, they would have no idea what's going on. But like, we've seen this with our own eyes, that places we used to be able to ride, we can't anymore. And so that's the way, when I think about conservation, that I would also like to incorporate into those conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's good. And I know that there's a lot of good things. We had a lot of people say, like, well, we do a lot of trail maintenance and we do a lot of volunteer work. And I do think those are good. You know, at the bare minimum, that has to happen. Otherwise, you get eroded out trails that are washing sediment into streams. There was an example, and we talked about this, but somewhere in Appalachia, there was a community of cyclists who, there was a trail that wasn't maintained very well. It was washing out into a native brook trout stream, and they all came together as a community, and you had cyclists saying, we want to help and we want to fix the trail. It'll make the ride better, and it will take help put less sediment into the water. And they partnered with Trout Unlimited to come in, and they all came together and they put money into rebuilding this trail, and it helped, put less sediment into that stream and help the native brook trout, which are so sensitive to spawning in places like that. So it's things like that that give me a lot of hope, and thinking about what are some ways that we could do that here in the Ozarks. And honestly, as an outsider, first, my question is that happening already and I don't know about it? And then two, what are some other ways that we could do that collectively as a community, and bridging the gap between hunting and fishing, cyclists, and other people, hikers, horseback riders, even those pesky side-by-siders who are just tearing around on public land that also get a ton of...
At least we're not them, right? Is that what... No, just kidding. Just kidding.
But,
it's going to open a whole other can of worms.
I know, I'm not trying to go there. But yeah, I don't know. Like, what does... I would like to see more of that, and I don't know if that's already happening to some extent. Is there anything that you're aware of?
Not formally. And I think, I don't know if you know Leif Kinberg at the Illinois River Watershed.
Oh, yeah, we know Leif.
Yeah, Leif's He's a
great word.
Tremendous and amazing human being.
He's so amazing. He needs his own word.
He needs his own word. We made that up for you, Leif. But like, when you think about the work that he's doing about preserving their watershed, like, that impacts everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think those are places where we should probably lean in together to understand what it looks like to preserve those watersheds, because that's going to help us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is fun. I know we could talk for a lot more time on this. If you're watching on YouTube, it is getting a little bit dark. We've got a little bit more time. Plunkett, is there anything that I've not asked Mike about specifically, or Mike, do you feel like there's anything else that we've not covered that you kind of want to?
I don't know. I'm trying. I asked our cycling group. We got about 100 people in there. I sent them the podcast, and I should just turn over the responses to you guys. But
oh boy,
like, I would tell you, like, it created some really good conversations within our group about what does it look like to be responsible as cyclists. Are we open to the critique? Can we listen to what people, even if we don't agree? And yeah, there were people that didn't agree, but there were also people that are like, I never thought about it that way. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would just validate these conversations, that it is things that within the cycling community we are trying to understand also, that maybe don't have a forum like this that we're talking about. And I would just say, anytime there's an opportunity to dig into these conversations, number one, we should, and we should really think through how do we see the advocate in each other as we think about the Ozarks. And because I love this place, and this is home, and I don't want it to go anywhere. And yet we still understand that change, as you guys talked about, is happening. And so we're not going to stop it. I don't want to stop it. I've enjoyed a lot of the change that has happened here. Yeah. But I do understand that I go back to that principle that change can be good, but if it's going to affect the way that you belong to this place, we need to step back and have a different conversation. And unfortunately, we see that happening probably more often than not. And so that would be my ask to everybody, is to move a little bit slower, to ask better questions, to, when we think about what we want to do with land, that we engage community more intentionally. I just don't think you can do more of that than I think you can do more of that than we're doing. And I realize we're not going to all agree. I get it. But I think it starts with an understanding of the posture of that other people do have an opinion that is valid. And even if I don't agree with you, we need to sit at a table and we need to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Or sit in my backyard.
Or sit in your backyard.
The chickens walk around.
As it cools down in August. That's right.
You had,
so
to wrap this up, you had mentioned earlier a posture of learning, and I appreciate that framework because, well, really for us, this whole experiment of the Ozark podcast has started from a posture of learning.
Sure.
It's trying to figure out, why do we value the things we value? Why do we love the things we love? Why do we feel certain ways about certain places that we go? All the way down to the history, the how-to, how do I catch fish? How do I hunt big deer? How do I steward this place? How do I do a controlled burn or a prescribed burn? How do I bring quail back to my backyard? Not my backyard specifically, but the backyard of where I live. All of those kind of things.
Regenerative agriculture for
all of it.
wild game management.
Yeah, like it's a posture of learning. It's seeking understanding of why are we kind of the way we are. And it's been a joy to bring so many guests in that conversation to try to help uncover that. And I guess where I'm going with this to wrap this up is I'm thankful that we had a kind of enough of a firestorm coming from a place, a posture of, how would you describe the posture of maybe just the thought of the conversation of biking as a whole?
Our posture?
Yeah.
My thought on it was just, hey, there's this tension, and where's it coming from? Let's talk to someone who's a history professor, and maybe he's got an idea.
Some posture of understanding and learning.
Yeah,
but definitely
it's good.
With some, it's tinted towards, we don't understand this, what the heck's going on, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And through conversations like this and with you, Mike, and others, I don't know, hopefully we can bring everybody to that place of wanting to at least take on a posture of learning.
Yeah.
And I would say for the outdoorsman who maybe doesn't like the bikers, let's learn to understand. For the bikers who may really not like the farmer or the guy who looks at him sideways when they're on the road, or the guy who's, barking at him because he's trying to hunt or whatever it may be, let's lean towards a posture of understanding, of learning. And if we can do that as Ozarkers, we're just going to be way better off across the board. Yeah.
We try our best to acknowledge everybody that, if someone's coming the other way, we wave. Andy Chastain, who's part of the cycling community, has done just champion. What does it look like to just see each other and acknowledge that? Wes Evans, who's Benton County Farm Bureau president for Benton County, they've had conversations around, can we just see each other as human being and acknowledge that we're here? What a difference that makes of just disarming and everything. And then I would also say to my fellow cyclists that are listening, get out of the way. Yes, do it when it's safe, but you let people get around you. You don't want those trucks bearing down your neck or, anything like that. And so it's not that big of a deal, yet at the same time we get so upset about the things that actually don't matter at all. Mm-hmm. If we can just treat each other as humans. I always say, if we were walking down the street and someone said, "Can I go around you?" They're like, "Sure, go ahead." It would be so nice. "Oh, pardon me, excuse me, let me get the door for you." But we're on a bike and a car, and it's next thing you know, it's devolved into World War III within about 2 seconds for no apparent reason. So
that's good.
We got to slow it down a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a lot of fun. I think we're probably going to pause on this specific conversation with cycling. We've got deer season coming up. We've got bear season coming up. We got other things we got to talk about. But this has been a ton of fun. I've learned a lot from you, and even have watched and listened to some other biking interviews. I was watching one the other day of Andy Chastain that you just mentioned. He was talking about, how he's thinking about it, his rule of 3 race. Yeah. I think that's really cool. Bringing again the community together. Got a lot of respect for bringing people together, and it sounds like we're building right now, and I say we collectively within our community, it sounds like we're building about 3 miles of trail every single week.
It's something to that effect.
If
I wouldn't
not
doubt
more.
that.
And that's averaging over the last 10 years. So it's this is full force ahead, and there's only going to be more people coming. And so how can we, welcome people in and bring people in a way that, they feel like they belong, but they also want to pour back into this place. Right. and make this place a home, become a part of the community, and become a member of the Ozarks. And that's what I would hope for the future.
Sign us up. I'd love to participate in that. That's my hope as well.
Yeah,
cool. That's great. Mike, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.
Gentlemen, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for having this conversation. It's necessary and needed. And let's keep having a conversation and lean into it, because I think the future of the Ozarks is going to depend on all of us. And I think if we're having conversations like this, we've got a great future ahead.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's good. Well, if y'all have been with us for a while and you found us because you love conversation around hunting and fishing and conservation and all of that, or if you jumped on only in the last 4 or 5 weeks and you've caught the bike conversation into, now continued kind of the final for a while bike conversation, we're glad you're with us. We're glad you've joined us, and be looking forward to some deer content, some how-tos, all of it really coming towards deer season. And send this to a buddy who's a biker, or who's not a biker, or who may not like a biker, and make sure they listen to it. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Sounds good. See y'all.